With Marvel finally announcing the long-awaited and heavily rumored cast for the upcoming Fantastic Four film, I decided that it'd be a fantastic idea to revisit Fantastic Four 2015, otherwise known as Fant4stic. Now, as most people know, Fant4stic has had its name dragged through the mud ever since it was released, and to be honest, I can't blame anyone for doing so. Even I despised this movie when I first made a video ranting about this movie long ago, because this movie is an insanely frustrating and mostly boring experience from start to finish. However, after rewatching this movie for the first time in years, I've come around on Fant4stic in a way that I wasn't expecting. And before any of you get your hopes up, no, I don't suddenly think this movie is good. No, I don't think this movie is a hidden gem. And no, I don't think Fantastic Four 2015 will ever become one of those cult classic movies that were initially ignored when they came out, but people end up loving as the years go on, as shown by the likes of Power Rangers 2017. What I think is fair to say about Fant4stic though is that despite all of its flaws, which, trust me, there are a lot of them, you can still see a decent amount of missed potential. Trust me, I know what you're thinking. There's no way that Fant4stic has missed potential, it's a terrible superhero movie that deserved to be critically panned, as it's easily one of the worst superhero movies ever made, and you're not about to sell me on this movie having good ideas or anything going for it. That's just not possible. You're partially right. However, while I understand that mindset, the goal of this video is to try to generate a new discussion surrounding this movie now that people are going to probably re-watch every Fantastic Four movie leading up to the new one. Now, I'll be honest, when I first decided to re-watch Fant4stic, I was dreading the idea of watching this movie. I thought I was going to hate it the same way I hated Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 3, but truthfully, I don't hate Fantastic Four 2015, and that's thanks to this movie striving so hard to be more of a sci-fi movie with superhero elements than trying to be another generic formulaic superhero movie. If you ask me, we should at least applaud or appreciate the fact that this movie attempted to be as different as possible in such a saturated movie genre, even though it didn't work out in the end. And while it didn't work out in the end, it's not because of this movie's director. I say that because, unfortunately, Fantastic Four didn't work out due to it being yet another tale of two halves superhero movie. Just like Suicide Squad 2016 or Justice League 2017, Fantastic Four is yet another blatantly butchered superhero movie, and you can just tell by the fact that there's a sudden 1-year time skip that blatantly cuts this movie into two entirely different halves that both don't work for different reasons. The first half of Fantastic Four focuses on being slow, as it wants you to understand just how complex the Fantastic Four are. It wants you to care for each member of the Fantastic Four, but for different reasons. And it also wants you to be wary of their inevitable fate, which is them getting their unwanted superpowers. And we'll get into why that decision was a double-edged sword in a minute, but the second half of this movie makes almost no sense at all when you compare it to the first half of this movie. There's no breathability in the second half whatsoever. As far as the second half is concerned, it has no interest in rewarding the viewer for sitting through so much setup and spending so much time getting to know the Fantastic Four, because all it wants to do is get to the end of the film. No, it doesn't matter that there were a ton of questionable creative decisions that created plot holes in the second half of this movie, such as characters making decisions they arguably wouldn't make if the first half of this movie is anything to go by. It also doesn't help that the pacing of the second half of this movie is so bad that it almost feels like we're watching someone attempt to break down what they could remember about the movie to one of their friends who didn't watch this movie for obvious reasons. You might think I'm joking when I say that, but it legitimately feels like we're seeing exactly what someone's picturing in their head as they say things like, Yeah, so there's this time skip, and next thing you know, they're hunting Reed down because Reed goes MIA for whatever unexplained reason, but then they finally get Reed after Ben hunts him down for some government organization, which was only done so the government could control the Fantastic Four. However, that decision backfires on the government since it leads to the Fantastic Four going back to the planet that gave them their powers, so Doctor Doom can make his last minute entrance into the movie, even though this movie kind of just forgets that he was ever in the movie to begin with, and that was weird considering there is a Doctor Doom name drop in the first half of this movie as a joke about Victor's dark personality, but then he never does anything evil outside of being jealous of Reed and Sue's friendship, so he really just comes off as a jealous outsider instead of a villain in this movie. Anyway, as I was saying, Doctor Doom comes back to Earth after we're sent back onto this terrible generic looking CGI planet to get Doom, but then for some reason Doom then decides to go back to that planet, but you can tell that was done only so that the Fantastic Four can have a space to do a terrible anticlimactic final battle against Doom despite never working on their powers as a team, and then it's just over. The movie suddenly ends. By the time this movie rolls its credits, you kind of just find yourself sitting there thinking, what the hell did I just watch? And what makes the experience of watching this movie so frustrating is that I can't help but feel like if we lived in the timeline where we somehow managed to get the director's original vision for Fantastic Four 2015, there might have been a possibility for it to have become a cult classic. From the two halves we're given in this butchered final product, it almost feels like this movie was going to be Marvel's Batman Forever. For those of you who have never watched Joel Schumacher's Batman Forever is a fairly hated and fairly ignored Batman movie. The reason why a lot of people tend to ignore or hate Batman Forever is because it prioritizes helping the viewer understand how much weight is on Bruce Wayne's shoulder and how Bruce Wayne's trauma plays such a massive role in him becoming Batman. The movie spends less time being a traditional superhero movie and more time trying to dive into the mental psyche of Bruce Wayne as it builds towards him healing and becoming the caped crusader who saves Gotham from the Riddler and Two-Face at the end of the movie. With Fantastic Four 2015, it feels like this movie's director was attempting to create a superhero movie that's similar to Batman Forever in a sense. By that, I mean it almost feels like this was a movie, just like Batman Forever, that strays away from what people loved from previous iterations of these superhero characters as part of an effort to try and bring something new to those characters and the superhero movie genre. Whether that was worth it or not, I feel like it's a hard conversation to have, as there was studio meddling and we don't have the full picture here. However, what I will say, and this is just my opinion, is I feel like bringing in more sci-fi and some horror elements to this Fantastic Four movie was more worth it than this movie's director trying to just recreate a carbon copy of the Fantastic Four 2005 movie, considering it already exists. On top of that, I truly think that this movie is a sci-fi superhero movie with light horror elements or themes that work in favor of the first half of this movie and this iteration of the Fantastic Four, even if they get butchered later on in the movie. As I mentioned earlier in this video, the first half of this movie is a bit of a double-edged sword, and there are two reasons for that. Firstly, the first 10 to 25 minutes of this movie is way slower than it has to be, but it's admittedly for a pretty decent reason. It spends a lot of time building up its core cast of characters to the point where you do get to slowly understand each of their flaws and what makes them so similar to one another. Reed's a little too smart for his own good, and Sue is a little distant from people, but her ability to recognize patterns makes her the perfect companion to work alongside Reed. Johnny's only helping out for the wrong reasons, but that doesn't really matter as he ends up clicking with Reed almost immediately. And Ben is Reed's biggest supporter, even if that means he has to let go of Reed so Reed can strive and become his own person. And what I like the most about this iteration of the Fantastic Four is that they feel like they're inspired by the Breakfast Club. Each and every one of them is in some way an outcast. They're all complex or different in some way, shape, or form, and they could easily be thrown into a coming-of-age movie as a supporting character and they'd fit the mold. And while I understand why some may possibly hate this movie's iteration of these iconic characters, I think the small glimpses of potential that we see in this movie justify them being written this way. This finally brings me to my second reasoning, which is far more important than the first reasoning in regards to why the first half of Fantastic is a double-edged sword. The best scene in Fantastic takes place in the first half of this movie, and it's so frustrating to watch because you can almost feel what we were robbed of. There's a scene where the Fantastic Four finally sit down and get to know each other for the first time since they started working on this massive project together. In this scene, they're being as vulnerable as these characters can be and finally getting comfortable with each other. It's probably the most human I've seen a group of misfit superhero characters be amongst one another before they formally become a superhero team that has phenomenal chemistry. As I've said so many times, every single character in this movie has that misfit or outcast vibe to them. So when they bond together over the one thing they have in common, you get that this is the start of something special moment we get in a movie like The Breakfast Club. Normally, I wouldn't pick such a specific movie to describe something like this, but it's hard to associate this movie with the likes of the Avengers coming together. The feeling you get in Fantastic Four 2015 is not even close to the greatness you feel from the Avengers coming together. More importantly though, what makes this scene so good is that we finally get to see the Fantastic Four begin to slowly form that family feel we want out of them. They're making jokes, laughing, drinking, and actually clicking with each other as they all collectively acknowledge how far they've come with the teleporter they built together. This is the first time and only time they feel like they're becoming the family we want them to become. This is the first and only time where the characters finally feel like they're building chemistry with one another and are on the same page with each other. This is the first and only time you can feel this movie finally beginning to find its footing and head into the superhero vibe we want out of this film. Unfortunately though, this one decision made by the Fantastic Four leads to a not so fantastic outcome, pun intended of course. While I've tried to maintain it's not so bad attitude throughout the majority of this video, I just have to be as honest and as blunt as possible. The entire second half of Fantastic Four 2015 is a head-scratching mess. As much as I wish I could say differently, I genuinely can't tell you what they, as in Fox, who we know played a role in meddling with this film, were even going for in the second half of this movie. It's not like I was watching this film and was able to immediately think to myself, oh, they butchered this film in favor of trying to make it feel like Marvel's Avengers at the very last minute, just like we saw with Justice League 2017. Everything about the second half of this film is completely different from everything in the first half of the movie, and almost none of it works whatsoever. The climax of this movie is no longer than about 10 minutes. The pacing is super fast instead of being slow, or at least consistent enough for you to feel like the movie is moving at a consistent pace. The Fantastic Four lose all of the newfound chemistry that they had before they use the teleporter and get their powers, as they pretty much hate each other during the entirety of the second half of this movie. The Fantastic Four never once train with each other. Unlike the other Fantastic Four films, we barely see them train at all, as the only moments we see them working on the powers last for a few seconds, and we're talking about the same team that's suddenly expected to save the world in the very last minutes of this film without any team bonding experience whatsoever. If you're curious because you've never seen this film for completely understandable reasons, yes, they suck as a team even at the very final moments of this film. Finally, Doctor Doom is also frustratingly terrible, just like the rest of this movie, as he's treated like a complete afterthought. What makes all of these problems so incredibly frustrating isn't just that these creative decisions are bad ideas, it's that all of these creative decisions feel like they were completely avoidable. Every single negative thing I've already mentioned is completely fixable and probably weren't problems in the director's cut of Fantastic Four. And this isn't just me trying to be an apologist for this movie. This movie isn't anywhere close to the word good. It has its fair share of problems from top to bottom, but you can tell almost immediately that the entire second half of the movie simply isn't meant to be there. All of that work put in to make a slow but compelling first half of a movie was done for absolutely no reason at all. It sucks because I truly feel like this would have been another Zack Snyder's Justice League situation, where if we got the director's cut eventually, people might have come around on this film. There would be possibly far less toxicity surrounding this Fantastic Four movie had Fox not meddled so heavily with this movie. They killed every bit of momentum the theatrical cut of this movie had in favor of this terribly put together final act of a movie because they thought they knew better than this movie's director, Josh Trank, who was making arguably one of the more compelling superhero movies we would have ever seen. And trust me, I know what you're probably thinking after hearing me say all of this. If it frustrates you so much, why not try to tell me how you'd fix the second half of Fantastic Four since you claim to see missed potential in this movie? And you know what? I'll try to do exactly that. Let's try to fix one of the worst superhero movies ever made. Everybody, I present to you Fantastic Four 2015, the I Don't Beat Games cut. After the Fantastic Four go to that terrible CGI planet, Planet Zero, and come back with their powers, I'd keep the body horror scene that was intended to highlight how traumatic getting superpowers can be. To me, that scene works in the context of this Fantastic Four movie as it matches the serious sci-fi tone to the film. On top of that, I love the idea of letting each character get their moment of being confused as to what's going on and showing off each of the Fantastic Four's powers like that. What I do after that, however, is completely gut out the 1-year time skip. It's only in the theatrical cut of the movie to try and justify the sudden switch up in the second half of the movie. Plus, it makes the viewer think, why did I even watch the body horror scene if we were gonna do a time skip anyway? That's gotta go. Instead, I throw in another montage scene that speeds up as it progresses. This movie has already shown us prior in the first half of this movie that if you could find the perfect placement for it, montages will work out perfectly fine in this movie. So I throw in a montage of doctors and scientists working on the Fantastic Four and slowly upgrading their facilities, whether it's them conducting experiments, taking samples for tests, and slowly helping them heal over time doesn't necessarily matter, but any of those, if not all of those, would work for a montage right after the body horror scene. Where the montage would stop though is after the Fantastic Four finally begin to get a handle on their powers. I'd want it to be that the entire second half of this film focuses on helping these characters learn how to work together, even if it brings out the worst in them due to tough conversations. This whole middle arc of this hypothetical fixed movie is about accepting these new biological changes that they have and learning how to make the best of it by working together as a team. This creative idea is inspired by and would be done to mirror the first montage in the movie that highlights how well they work together when given the space to do so. Now, as the Fantastic Four are learning to work together as a superhero team and getting a much better handle on their powers thanks to Franklin Storm and his team, here's where the movie should have begun to phase Dr. Doom back into the movie. In this hypothetical scenario, the Baxter building would have seen much needed upgrades to keep up with the needs of the Fantastic Four, so they'd get some weird reading from Planet Zero on some weird science radar thing due to it being active again. In this case, the movie would purposely not reveal it's Dr. Doom until the Fantastic Four debate back and forth about what it could be, which would lead to them mentioning Victor, causing them to finally be okay with going back to Planet Zero for the first time since they got their powers. The movie then would cut away to Doom's first scene since the whole cast of the movie got their powers. Just like the Fantastic Four, he has a body horror scene to establish Doom's transformation and newfound powers. This would also allow the movie to give Doom's new transformation some context so he doesn't just look like some generic sci-fi alien villain that was made for some low-budget straight-to-DVD movie to the viewers. Plus, it doubled down on the very refreshing light sci-fi horror themes in this Fantastic Four movie. After going to Planet Zero to discover what's going on, Dr. Doom is then revealed to the Fantastic Four who try to convince him that they want to help him, but they fail to change his mind. This leads to the final fight of the theatrical cut, except instead of the Fantastic Four winning this fight, they lose and go back to Earth. Their loss causes the transporter to be destroyed and the Fantastic Four to now be demoralized, and that leaves Doom alone. Doom naturally would continue to make more changes to Planet Zero so he could continue to get more powerful thanks to this planet. What I want the most after all of this is for the Fantastic Four to regroup, have some much needed tough conversations to make them closer to one another, figure out why they failed to beat Doom, and come together to figure out how to make a stronger transporter. The new transporter is built throughout another epic montage, but to keep things interesting and make things a little more hype, I throw in scenes of the Fantastic Four happily training together to highlight them getting stronger and them becoming more of a family. Finally, once all of this is over, it leads to the final showdown. But before they go, members of the Baxter Building come together to present a gift for our now lovable characters who are more connected to each other than ever before. A brand new set of superhero suits with this movie's interpretation of the iconic Fantastic Four logo. Everyone suits up in their powerful suits that help keep their powers in check, and off they go to fight Dr. Doom, which leads to an amazing back and forth fight between this movie's characters. Just when you think all hope is lost for the Fantastic Four, they beat Dr. Doom with a massive team-based combo that we've never seen before. The movie cuts away immediately to show the one and only time they practiced it as their in case if all else fails move, and the movie cuts away to a minor time skip. Doom's been taken care of, maybe even locked away just as a homage to the first Fantastic Four film, leaving him to still be a looming threat to Earth. The Fantastic Four are now running the Baxter Building and finally acting like a family as they celebrate winning this battle together. One of the final shots of the movie is the camera focusing on a picture of the Fantastic Four working together with Victor before they ever took the transporter together, and the movie ends with, and you guessed it, saying, "That's a fantastic photo. Good times." I don't care what anyone says, we gotta keep in the "it's fantastic, wait, say that again" type of line, because the deliveries for those lines are hilarious. They're so bad that they're good. Of course, the post-credit scene just sets up the whole Dr. Doom is still alive hook for the viewer, as this is a superhero movie after all. We gotta set up a hypothetical sequel for this hypothetical scenario. There, I did the best I possibly could to fix one of the worst superhero movies ever made. All it took was a lot of thinking and using that vibe of the first half of this movie to picture what might match that vibe and build off of that thought process. Trust me, I know, I'm no scriptwriter at all. I just talk about superhero movies, shows, and sometimes video games. I love these movies, shows, or games regardless of how bad they are. Although there are specific cases where I simply can't find anything to love because of how bad something is. Those cases are extremely rare ones. However, as someone who loves superhero media, I'm really interested to see the reception of this fix, as it could potentially kick off a series where I revisit movies I've already made videos for and try to fix each and every one of them one by one. It'd be like I'm Thanos, but instead of gathering Infinity Stones, I'd be creating cinema. As for Fantastic Four 2015, I don't really have much else to say. It's not a good movie, nor is it a fantastic movie. It's an absolute mess after the first 20 to 40 minutes, but regardless, I stand by the statement I made earlier in this video. I do think there was some potential for this movie to be a cult classic film years after it was released if we got the original vision of this movie. Fan4stick definitely had the chance to bring some much needed experimentation into the superhero genre, and for that reason alone, I'm willing to no longer hate it. I've seen worse movies before, like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 3. Now that movie, I hate with every fiber of my body. That movie sucks. You know what though? We've come a long way since the beginning of this video. Just like the superhero movie genre has also come a long way since this movie was released. Gotta say, when you really take time to think about that, it's pretty fantastic.